Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. The 2025 APEC Leaders Meeting has officially opened in Gyeongju, marking South Korea's first time hosting it in 20 years. President Lee Jae Myung welcomed heads of 21 member economies, including a first face-to-face meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. With global protectionism deepening and geopolitical tensions rising, attention now turns to how Korea will leverage this moment. Can it lead meaningful dialogue on free trade and economic cooperation? And what direction will the upcoming Gyeongju Declaration signal for the region? For answers to this, we connected Jeffrey Robertson, Associate Professor of Diplomatic Studies at Yonsei University. A big welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us, Professor. So, like I've mentioned in our lead, South Korea has become the host of APEC for the first time in 20 years since Busan. What kind of an impact do you think this will have on Korea's diplomatic standing as of now?
Yeah, well, Korea did a great job 20 years ago, and it's doing a great job this time around as well. And that's under very difficult circumstances. So if you think about it, we've got two summits which have been occurring in Korea this time around. We've got APEC, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, but we also have TRUMPEC, Trump Economic Cooperation. And TRUMPEC and APEC don't really go well together, but South Korea has really effectively pursued its own interests, facilitated the interaction with regional players, and most importantly, facilitated interaction between China and the United States. And I think every state in the region has been hoping for that. So South Korea has done really well, and its diplomatic standing, is top-notch.
Wow, putting it as TRUMPEC, it's a very interesting point, Professor. Now, so given this global trend of rising protectionism, of course, with the lead of Washington, what is the diplomatic and economic significance of hosting this APEC leadership meeting in Gyeongju?
Yeah, so APEC is at a crossroads almost. We're basically at the end of an era in global governance. We're at the end of the era of American-led dominance and American-led trade liberalization. And we're entering a new era, a multipolar era. But whenever there's a transformation in global order, it's not always smooth, and there's a lot to be worked out. And so for South Korea hosting APEC at this stage, it's basically contributing to the path that APEC will take. And it's one of two paths. It will either head down the path of transforming and adapting to a new era, or it will head down the path of maintaining the hope of restoring an older era. And that potentially leads to the idea of almost having the movement, but not having the spirit behind it, almost like The Walking Dead, almost like a multilateral zombie. So with protectionism on the rise, the timing of this summit really seems to be very more critical. Now, this all brings us to the Gyeongju Declaration. South Korea's Foreign Minister Cho Hyun says there are disagreements between the U.S. and other member states over whether to explicitly support free trade in the final text. What's your outlook? Yeah, the Gyeongju Declaration was perhaps biting off more than South Korea could chew. Maybe they should have chosen something a little bit smaller and pursued a much smaller range. A declaration that supports trade liberalization is a big ask. And, when you have a declaration, you have to get the agreement of the member states, and it either goes down in one of two paths at this stage. We're going to get a declaration which is basically a word salad. All the key words are there, but it really is just rhetoric. It says nothing. Or we're going to go down the path where there is no declaration because nobody can agree upon anything. And either way, that is a little bit of a risk for Gyeongju. So you may have heard of the Doha and the Doha round. In history textbooks, the Doha round and Doha itself is associated with the end of multilateralism, the withering of the WTO, the breaking apart of the WTO, and the heading off towards FTAs in every direction. We don't want Gyeongju to be the place where the withering of APEC occurred. So I'm hopeful that they will come to an agreement and South Korea can secure some sort of agreement which will not associate Gyeongju with the end of APEC.
Let's hope for that. But like you said, it's a very big ask. So if those divisions on, trade issues actually persist, do you see any realistic chance for APEC to kind of restore multilateral trade or even propose new forms of regional cooperation?
Yeah, so to answer this question, I'd have to go back to the very beginning of APEC. When APEC was formed in the late 1980s and the early 1990s, when it reached its height, it was the result of middle powers. And that's what all the textbooks will say, particularly textbooks in Australia or textbooks in South Korea or Indonesia. They'll tell you that it was the middle powers which created APEC. But they only did that because they had the support of a benign great power, the United States. They were only able to do that because they had resources in their foreign ministries, more resources than they've ever had since. And they had the capacity of academic and government interaction, which allowed these ideas to come forth. All of that is lacking at the moment, and it's going to be really hard for APEC to play the same role. APEC is, 30 years old. It's starting to show its age, and the next step will be adapting to a new era, and whether it can actually do that or not, that's still into the future.
So we have to keep our close eyes on whether the summit could offer anything beyond just symbolic declarations and more meaningful value.
Most definitely.
Now, let's turn to key agenda topics, Professor. So AI cooperation and demographic strategy have been both listed as priorities. So how do you view this trend of technology and population issues expanding into the diplomatic and security arena?
Well, this is really smart diplomacy on Korea's behalf. They are domestic issues which Korea is bringing into the international. And by bringing it into the international and bringing it into a forum like APEC, South Korea is enabling itself to not only show how it is handling these issues, but also to attract others and to showcase its own ability to address these issues and attract others to help support South Korea to continue to address the issues. So it's really smart diplomacy, and I'm hopeful that some ideas will come out of it.
Right. And Professor, lastly, a series of major summits were held alongside APEC. We all are aware, including the Korea-US, Korea-Japan, and US-China talks as well. And we're also expecting a South Korea-China talks tomorrow. What role do you think these summits actually played in advancing President Lee Jae Myung's so-called pragmatic diplomacy agenda?
Well, Lee Jae Myung has actually achieved quite a lot in the context outside of trade. I mean, trade is a problematic issue at the moment, but he's been able to secure access to allow South Korea to push ahead with nuclear submarines, and this is really significant. This opens South Korea up to reaching out to other states which want nuclear submarines, reaching out to other states to sell those nuclear submarines. And South Korea is a very prominent state in the supply of weapons at the moment, and it's only going to get bigger.
Right, so it seems Korea's summit diplomacy is clearly gaining traction, and we'll see how it shapes regional dynamics moving forward. Professor Robertson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
But this year's APEC summit wasn't just about trade. For the first time, AI and demographic strategy were elevated as core agenda items, marking a clear shift where technology is now shaping diplomacy itself. So what's behind Korea's push for AI leadership, and how far can this initiative go? For a deeper discussion on this, we are joined in the studio by Park Joo-young, professor at the Graduate School of Culture and Technology at KAIST. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor.
Thanks for having me.
So let's begin our discussion with AI cooperation. South Korea is the chair of APEC, we are aware, and it has made AI collaboration a very key issue. So what do you think is the reasoning behind this choice, and how could this actually boost cooperation among other members?
Sure. So AI, of course, is the main driver of economic growth these days, and by some estimates, AI companies are responsible for 80% of the stock market growth in the US. And without them, the GDP growth would amount to around 0.1%. So given the size of the industry, it would have been very difficult for Korea to turn a blind eye because its economy is so based on semiconductors and IT. And just within the past couple of days, the market cap of NVIDIA, the largest AI chip maker, has surpassed $5 trillion, which is larger than the GDP of Germany. And remember that the US government has been increasingly willing to exercise political pressure over those semiconductor companies. So against this backdrop, with the trade agreement between the US and Korea imminent, it was important for Korea to show the world it was willing to become a major player in AI. And just now, China and US also appear to have agreed to somewhat a new terms of trade. So AI seems to be the common link between those APEC economies, and it will be where the next phase of economic cooperations will take place.
Wow, Professor, thank you so much for giving us a clear view of how AI is really is already a big part of the global economy. Now, in fact, President Lee Jae Myung actually proposed an AI initiative at the summit. How would you assess this initiative as an expert?
Yeah, so Lee gave a speech at the APEC CEO summit and proposed his, quote, AI initiative, unquote. So if you look at the wording in his address, the keyword seems to be the AI for all, which appears to mean AI will be used to promote solidarity, cooperation, and sharing of the fruits of growth among the APEC's member economies. And he also said that a foundational AI legislation in Korea will follow soon, after which came the news of new investments by prominent tech companies like Amazon in the scale of billions of US dollars. So everything about AI governments was wrapped into one event. Now, this is actually in line with what other leading countries and companies have been doing. So AI legislation was first led by the EU, followed by the US, and it has come to Korea. And because Korea has its own large high-tech companies like Samsung and Hyundai Motors, it is an attractive market for those multinational companies. And as far as comparison with other international discussions goes, the goal at this moment is more about setting Korea on the same level with other countries rather than trying to be too different. So it is a reflection of Korea's economy, advanced, technology heavy. So it was a rational choice from Korea's perspective, both policy and economy-wise.
Right, so it's going in line, not really having a unique initiative. Now, but there's still challenges that we are aware of. There's still wide gaps in technology and regulation among member countries as well. So could you tell us what are the major policy challenges APEC economies actually need to jointly address this successful AI transition?
Yeah, so this is a very important question because AI is entering into our lives, but at the same time, the differing pace of adoption and the emerging problems with AI are becoming clearer. So there are a couple of large issues that will need to be addressed with policy. The first is AI safety and reliability. Take, for instance, a talking AI like ChatGPT and LLMs that people are the most familiar with. Now, these are causing numerous negative disruptions in the users' lives. So there are reports of those who are misled by the AI into being more socially isolated and doing harmful things to themselves, especially the young and the isolated are vulnerable. So the industry is saying they are building guardrails, but compared with other industries like automobiles or consumer electronics, they are still very inadequate. So also the output of LLMs are quite unreliable and inaccurate, that it's actually hurting the basic level of trust we need to have from technology. So the second is the environmental impact of AI. The huge data centers being built requires huge amounts of energy and resources. And according to a study by the Harvard Business Review last year, AI energy demand is set to surge by 1,000% next year from a year ago, and will surpass whole countries like Belgium. So this is raising energy prices for the average consumer and other essential industries like farming. But the AI industry so far has been quite indifferent to the issue because they want to build AI at all costs. So this hurts those smaller economies and countries most heavily impacted by climate, which needs a serious policy effort to address.
Right. So if I may ask you again, if I got it clear, so AI energy demand is rising and the cost of this is rising. So this is making the gap of economies that are able to afford this AI technology being right.
Yeah, that is exact.
So if South Korea now is going to take the lead in global AI governance, what conditions actually are needed to take place for the AI initiative to be more than just a one-off proposal?
Yeah, so this week was a great opportunity, in fact, for Korea to showcase its relevance. So U.S.-China trade tensions were somewhat resolved, and new trade deals were made. But also, if you look at APEC, there are 21 member economies. But on the list, though, the number that have a stake in AI is not that high if you take out the US, Japan, Canada, China, along with Korea. So then the question becomes, what can be done to make this initiative more sustainable when AI means different things for different economies? So here is where we have to be sort of really imaginative in what AI can do for us. So among the directions Korea take, I believe culture would be the most interesting and beneficial to those economies that are not really AI-driven, because culture is what binds people together and foster solidarity as the AI initiative. So of course, K-pop is a huge cultural phenomenon, but culture is a much wider concept. So Korea, for instance, can use its advanced AI to help preserve traditional cultures, histories, endangered languages of the world, and kickstart creative collaborations for new cultural products where AI has been shown to be potentially very useful.
Wow, that seems to be a very good and a helpful idea, using K-pop and culture to mend. Now, before we let you go, Professor, the big issue nowadays, NVIDIA.
Yeah.
NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang announced a large-scale AI partnership with South Korean firms, including a supply of over 260,000 Blackwell AI chips.
Right.
And this is an unprecedented amount, of course. So how do you read into this significance? And yes.
Yeah, so NVIDIA, the largest firm in AI in the world, has been very active in investments recently. But it also might help to understand how the AI economy works at this point. So think of the big names in AI development. I could name OpenAI, Microsoft, Anthropic, and Meta, among a few others. But one of the worrisome trends is that their AI sectors are losing a lot of money without generating revenue or profit, if at all. That is a very well-documented fact. And with the pressure going on because of the rising costs of those data centers, NVIDIA, I think, who has been counting on orders of their chips from those companies, I think they could be concerned with future prospects. That is why some people believe the recent investments actually do show some unsustainability of these companies. Now, this is where I think Korea comes into play, because I believe this contrasts with Korea's firms like Samsung and Hyundai Motors, because they actually are good at making actual profit from those concrete lifestyle products like automobiles and electronics. So investing in such a responsible and financially stable high-tech companies makes much more sense in the face of the aforementioned the risks of those traditional or the new AI companies. So the big question is, can AI really produce robust, stable, and useful products? I think Korean firms have the potential to find the answer, and if they succeed, that will be a huge boon for Korean companies, and the world seems very interested.
Right, so it will be a very bold push, and we're going to look forward to that. But Professor Park, we'll have to conclude our discussion right here. Thank you so much for your insights
My
tonight.
pleasure. Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.